So, I said that today I'm not going to do anything heavy. I'm not going to talk about politics, and I'm not going to talk even about matters of faith. What I'm going to talk about today is life. Life. Living, existing, surviving, and thriving. And I'm really feeling this because, I think that we really don't take time to consider what life really looks like, how life is really played out. And I want to go into something here. Like, for those of you who have been with me for a while, you know that I'm a car guy. And I'm not just a car guy, but I'm a motorcycle guy. I'm not just a motorcycle guy, but I'm a boat guy. And I'm not just a boat guy, but I'm an airplane guy. Basically, I'm a gearhead. Okay? And a bit of a nerd, too. But here's the thing. What I want to do is I want to talk today about a high-performance life. A high-performance life. Because I think that we really don't give a whole lot of consideration to living. We just kind of meander through it. And I think that that's really tragic that that we would do that. I think that it's important that this high performance life that we live, that we go through it, and we go through it with purpose, with intent. So, one of my, I don't know, I guess icons growing up, because I'm into cars and I'm into car design. There was a guy who was the founder of Lotus Cars. His name was Sir Colin Chapman, or Sir Colin Anthony Bryan Chapman, if you want to be really specific. But Colin Chapman is the founder of Lotus Cars, and before he made Lotus Road Cars, he made Lotus Race Cars. And his premise for his race cars was first, add lightness. Add lightness. And you would think that at face value, that doesn't really make sense. Add lightness. What does it mean to add lightness? What that means is to strip off anything that doesn't contribute to the car going faster or handling better or stopping sooner. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to look at, what are we carrying around? What are you carrying around? This is really big. Hang on for just a second. I'm going to do something. Yep. Okay, so we're good. Audio is good. I just had to double check that. When you are optimizing your life for high performance, you want to get rid of all the excess baggage. In other words, you can't go through life with junk in your trunk. Because if you have weight that you're carrying around that doesn't contribute to you going faster. See, let me give you an example, right? I'm a big fan of Tesla automobiles. And Teslas are actually very heavy cars. They're very heavy cars. But they're heavy for a reason. They carry around a massive battery pack. And this battery pack weighs close to 2,000 pounds by itself. But without that battery pack, the Tesla does not have the high performance capability and the extended range that it's known for. See, this battery is extra weight, but it serves a specific purpose. Let me give you an example in life. There are some of us that have a really close circle. Our circle of friends is very close, it's very tight. And then there are some that have many friends, many acquaintances, many connections. And you would think that the person with the fewer number of friends, contacts, and acquaintances would be a bit more agile, that they're able to respond to changing environments faster. But it's not always the case, because again, with the Tesla, not only does it have this massive battery pack, but because this battery pack is built into the floor of the car, it has a very low center of gravity, which means that even though the cars are heavy, they handle well, they accelerate well, and they stop well. This is because the weight that it's carrying is not excess weight, it's weight with a purpose. So sometimes you may have a lot of acquaintances, you may have a lot of friends, you may have a lot of connections, but those connections, those friends, those acquaintances, they all serve a purpose. And it doesn't necessarily mess with your agility as long as these are people, and catch this, please write this down. As long as these are people who are giving you energy, like that battery pack. Because see, there are some people that give you energy, and then there are others that just completely drain you. There are energy contributors, and there are energy vampires. And you don't want to have the energy vampires. And listen, you every now and again, you really need to take an inventory of everyone that you're connected to, because if you are looking at this on a regular basis, you are constantly reviewing whether or not this excess weight that you're carrying is productive or destructive. So that's the first thing. Just add lightness. You want to go through life with an easy yoke. And again, to use the example of Lotus cars, years ago I drove a car that is a very famous Lotus car. It was before the Esprit and all of these others, more recent one like the Evora and any of these newer cars. But this was called the Lotus Europa. And it kind of looked like a bread van, but it was tiny. It was only 43 inches tall from the ground. But this car, it didn't have a lot of power, but it was quick. And because it weighed right around 2,000 pounds, it was tremendously agile. And I remember the first time driving that, and it's almost a sublime experience, because the car actually feels like an extension of you and not something that you're piloting. See, that's the way life should be. Everything in your life should feel like an extension of yourself. It shouldn't feel like something that you're having to pilot or you're having to suffer through or that you have to endure. Man, life should be exciting, exhilarating. That's one of the hallmarks of a high-performance life, is that it's exciting. The next thing I want to talk about is economy. Now, people rarely talk about economy when it comes to high-performance vehicles, but when you look at cars like the Tesla, it has a lot of range considering its capability. It has this extended range because of this battery pack. But there are also a lot of goodness is built into the car. It's slippery, it's aerodynamic, it's well styled, it's the suspension is real sorted out. But it's economical. And when you look at the equivalent of miles per gallon in an electric car like a Tesla, the Tesla gets like the equivalent of 100 miles per gallon. But it can dust pretty much anything in a quarter mile. You see how that works? In other words, you want to be economical. There was a fighter back in the day. His name was Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker. God rest his soul. He passed away last year. It was last year or year before last. But anyway, Pete was a thing of beauty to watch fights, to watch him fight, because this guy fought with an incredible economy. He didn't waste punches, and he also didn't waste energy slipping punches. In my opinion, he was probably the best defensive fighter that ever lived. Never really had a big heavy punch, but he was able to slip and slide and duck and cover, and basically Pete didn't get hit. I mean, all fighters get hit at some level, but he never took the heavy shots. And why is that? Because of his economy of movement. The great Bruce Lee also said that basically in anything pertaining to fighting or anything pertaining to physical activity, that you shouldn't waste motion, because if you waste motion, you waste energy. And when you waste energy, you're not being economical. You're not conserving the energy that you have. Because, see, the thing is, none of us knows how long our journey is. Our journey could be very long, and then it could be short. And then within our global life's journey, we have a lot of little micro journeys along the way. And some are sprints and some are marathons. And we have to know when to exert the maximum amount of energy in order to accomplish one of these micro journeys. But then there are also macro journeys that are within the global journey, and you have to know when to conserve your energy, because you don't know whether it's going to be a sprint or a marathon. Not when you first start. There has to be some ongoing assessment of what you're doing. So the next thing is acceleration. How fast can you get off the dime? And there are a couple of things here that you need to think about. One is that you have to have power to accelerate, but then you also have to have torque, which torque is like the twisting force. Torque is what, horsepower is what makes the car go fast. Torque is what makes you push back in your seat. And then with horsepower and torque, you have to have traction. There was something on YouTube recently. One of my friends posted it was a drag race between a Dodge Hellcat Challenger and a Corvette Z06. Now, on paper, the Hellcat should win because it's not much heavier, but it's got a lot more horsepower. The problem with it is that the Corvette's suspension is set up a lot better, the tires are better, and its weight distribution is better. All of that contributes to better traction, which means that even though it has less power, it's able to get more of it to the ground right now. I'm going to tell you something. So many people, and let me just use me as an example so I don't make anybody mad. I spent a great deal of my life spinning my wheels. A lot of noise, a lot of power, but no traction. And so people would look at me and they're like, people get impressed by different things. And so when a car shows up and you listen to it and you hear the lope of the cam and you hear the the pulse of the exhaust and all of these things, you hear all the gear noise and you're like, wow, I'm impressed, right? But it's only impressive until it actually has to accelerate. Because if it doesn't have traction, I had a car back in the day as a Mustang, and we used to call it the Earth Mover. And the Earth Mover really only understood one thing when it launched. It understood sideways. When you accelerated, it would brake hard to the right, and you had to kind of fight to straighten it out and get it going in the right direction. That's how a lot of us live our lives. What happens is that we have all of this power, and we sound impressive, but when it comes time for the rubber meeting the road, there's no traction. And because there's no traction, there's no forward motion. And with no forward motion, a lot of the races that you probably should win, you don't win. So you want to make sure that not only can you that you have the capacity, the ability to accelerate, you have to know what it takes to actually get the power that you have to the ground to give you forward momentum. Another thing about that too is knowledge. Because one of the things that separates a good car from a great car are the 6 inches between the ears of the person in the driver's seat. That person will know whether or not to slip the gas a little bit or slip the clutch a little bit, or to allow the car to hook up. And if you don't know that, then what happens is you spin your wheels, and again, it looks impressive, but it's not going anywhere. So you want to make sure that you have proper traction. And again, to the driver has to know something called reaction time. Reaction time, in drag racing, they have this thing, they call it the Christmas tree or staging lights. And it goes from red to yellow to green. How many of you know that if you hit the gas when the lights turn green, you pretty much lost the race? You have to know that sweet spot between yellow and green. Because if you hit it too soon, you trip the disqualification light and you lose by default. Even though you may win technically by motion, you lose by default. But if you hit the gas right when the thing turns green, if the other guy hits it in that sweet spot between yellow and green, you lost. And that's so you have to not only have the right power, the right traction, the right setup, the right tires, the right weight distribution. You have to know how to react. And this reaction, when it comes to living a high performance life, has a lot of implications. Because when you go to the next thing that we're talking about, and that is how to handle the curves. Because life is full of curves. Life is not a drag strip. And life is not a NASCAR oval. Life is more like a road course. It's like Willow Springs or Sebring. It's like Nelson Ledges. It's like Monza or Spa or the Nürburgring. It's like any one of those fabled race courses. And you have to be able to negotiate the curves, the turns, the changes in elevation in order to have a successful run. So that means you have to have a proper suspension setup. You have to have the right springs, the right shocks, the right tires, the proper distribution of weight in the car. You have to have all of these things in alignment in order to run your race properly. One of the things that people rarely do is balance things out in life. I know people that work and work and work, and that's all they know is work. And then I know people that all they do is they live for one party to the next. They play. And you can't do one or the other all the time. Yes, if you work all the time, you may amass wealth, you may achieve some business success, but you'll do it at the expense of your relationships. You'll do it at the expense of your family. You'll do it at the expense of yourself. You will literally burn yourself out. The thing is that when you work all the time, it's like driving your car at red line on the tachometer at all times. And the red line is basically the maximum accepted engine speed. Now, there are cars that can actually go beyond the red line, but you don't want to do that. Matter of fact, Porsche now has a red line tracker that will log in its computer how many times you've exceeded the red line. And so when you go to buy a Porsche, you can download this information from the engine computer and find out if that 911 that you're about to buy, if it has been abused. So you want to make sure that everything is balanced. When you're driving a race car, you have the driver on one side, and to the other side you may have nothing. Well, let me tell you something. That in road racing, where you're trying to navigate and negotiate turns, that in order for your car to be properly balanced, you need to give yourself a little ballast. In other words, a little bit of extra weight where your passenger would be. Now, the other thing too is that you might be a little heavy. And if you ever notice something, that champion race drivers, particularly Formula One, IndyCar, Formula E, and SCCA, and also the Le Mans prototype classes, that these drivers are generally pretty fit people because they understand that they can't bring along any extra body weight on the race. And that if they have that extra weight, then they put themselves at a disadvantage relative to other drivers. So you have to balance things out to make sure that the car is happy going into the turns, that each wheel is properly weighted and no wheel is underweighted or overweighted, so that the suspension is fluid and the car glides through the turns. These are the things that you want to do. And you know, likewise, I remember one time I was on a small plane and we were doing some island hopping in the Caribbean. And the pilot asked me to move from my side of the plane to the other side of the plane because the weight distribution was a little off. He understood that, yes, the plane could probably overcome my extra weight on the starboard side of the plane, but he asked me to move to the port side of the plane because he understood that would balance the ship better in order to get a good, clean takeoff. And when I was in the Navy, when we were about to deploy, we would always have a call, secure the ship for sea. And part of securing the ship for sea was making sure that everything aboard the vessel was properly secured, that is tied down so that high seas would not damage anything or kill anybody, but also to make the ship balanced. Balance is essential to negotiating the curves of life. If you're not properly balanced, what happens is that you go through a turn, you lift a wheel. That means that instead of having 4 contact patches on the ground, you only have 3. And guess what usually happens when that happens? If you're not reacting properly, the car will spin out. It'll oversteer, which is the rear end breaking out and spinning around, or understeer, where the car basically plows on and it doesn't actually get front traction. So you got to make sure that you're set up for good handling. The next thing is braking. Braking. If you don't have the proper suspension setup, the proper tire setup, all things balanced, and having the proper reaction time, a lot of times when you'll brake and you'll brake in a bad way. Again, to recall Porsche's fabled 911, this was a car that, because it was rear engine, something called polar movement of inertia was geared toward the back end of the car. So that means that if you went into a sweeping on-ramp either a constant radius or a decreasing radius turn, if you accelerate it in the midst of that turn, the 911 would oversteer and it'd spin out. Also, if you were going around the turn fast and you suddenly lifted and hit the brakes, guess what? The back end would swap again. So how you brake effectively determines how your car handles. And you have to have the right reaction time. You have to know, and listen, let me tell you something. This is why it's important for you to understand what you're doing in life. And this goes back to discovering your why. Because if you don't know your why, what happens is you wind up running a race that's not yours. See, the thing is that you could put an Audi R10, which is a Le Mans prototype. You could take this car and you could put it on a drag strip, and it would be competitive with a lot of cars. But if you took the apex predator of drag racing, the top fuel dragster, this thing would literally destroy the Audi. And the Audi could probably do a quarter mile in about 9 seconds, which is pretty damn good. But that top fuel dragster knocks out that quarter of a mile in 4 seconds at about 300 miles an hour. In other words, the top fuel dragster is built for drag racing. Now, if you invert that and take the top fuel dragster to Le Mans, that dragster would not be able to negotiate the turns. And because it's designed only to be at optimum performance for a quarter mile, it doesn't have the fuel that it would take to negotiate the entire course. It doesn't have the stamina. So you have to know what your race is. And when you know your race, you can set up your car, that is yourself, to run your race properly. But here's the thing, that sometimes when you're on a road course, you might be running really good and you're coming up on traffic. You have to know exactly how to brake in order to keep the momentum that you have, but not cause a wreck with the cars ahead of you. You have to be able to look ahead, assess the situations in life, and know when to apply the brakes. See, listen, there are some people that all they know is balls to the wall. And that is not a profane term, by the way, guys. When people say balls to the wall, they think, testicles. And that's not what it means. This is an aircraft term from old World War II bombers that when they push the throttles all the way forward for maximum thrust, there were little white balls on the top of the throttle levers. And if you push them hard, they would hit the firewall of the cockpit. And that's where balls to the wall comes from. So if you're going, see, some people, all they know is balls to the wall. They don't know how to slow down. They don't know how to brake. And what happens is they wind up wrecking. They wind up spinning out. They wind up not finishing their race. They wind up tearing up their internal engine because they have over throttled themselves. Knowing how to brake is just as important as having good brakes. Nowadays they have these cars that have these carbon ceramic brakes. This is some real high-tech stuff. And I think that on the Porsche 911 that the carbon ceramic brake package costs like almost $9,000. But what this carbon ceramic brake package does is it means that your car will stop consistently over and over and over again without any fade. See, brake fade happens when you hit the brakes too often, or when you ride the brakes. What happens is that your brakes become so hot, the rotor, the caliper, the pistons all become so hot that they become ineffective. So the inverse to that is you don't want to go through life riding the brakes. You don't want to be overcautious. you're going to have to know how to accelerate and how to judiciously apply the brakes in your life. This is key not only to stopping, but it's key to handling how you negotiate the turns. And it is actually, believe it or not, how you apply your brakes is essential to your acceleration. Because if you over brake without shifting, without downshifting properly, what happens then is that you lose engine momentum. In other words, your engine will lug. And you're not in the sweet spot of the power band. And so when you come to accelerate out of the turn, you can't. It doesn't work. You come out without full power. So knowing how to brake not only has to do with handling, not only has to do with stopping, but it also has to do with how you accelerate out of the turn. Now, all of these things are really important. What I want to share with you now are some things to avoid. First of all, again, know the race that you're running. Some of us are built like dragsters. Others are built like road cars. Some are built like NASCAR stockers. Some like rally cars. Some are built like Baja trucks to run off-road races. Everybody's different. You have to know what your race is in order for you to run it competitively. And when I say competitively, I'm not talking about trying to compete with other people. Let me help you out. Because your only competition is the person you face in the mirror. If you understand that that is your competition, that you must be better than the last iteration of yourself. You must be better than your last lap. You must be better than your last turn. You must be better than your last start. Be better. Focus on constant improvement, not competing with others. And that means knowing the race that you have to run. The second thing to avoid is appearances. Because there have been cars that look fantastic. There was a Formula One car in the 70s by Terrell that had 6 wheels. Not 4 wheels, they had 4 up front and 2 in the back. And the idea is that having those 4 smaller wheels instead of 2 wheels up front would give a greater contact patch, which would therefore give you greater traction and more grip in the turns. This car was not incredibly successful. However, it did push the envelope of Formula One cars, but it wasn't the success in racing that its designers expected that it would be. Don't worry about appearances. Some of my friends who might be watching, my friend Tony Sharp is on. He would know, and my brother Brian, my friend Leon, these guys that I grew up with, they would know, because there were guys that had they had cars that they looked really good. They looked the part, but they were not really very fast. Don't get caught up in appearances. Don't worry about. Listen. It's good that if you have something that you understand the performance envelope of this thing and you know what it's capable of, that you want to put a little shine to it. I'm not telling you to not shine. No, get your shine on. But if you're getting your shine on, please make sure that basically, let me put it this way. Make sure that your car is not selling wolf tickets, that it's writing checks with its appearance that its ass or its wheels can't cash. You get it? You want to make sure that you have the goods to back up whatever you appear to be. So don't focus on appearance. function. Function. Because again, to cite Colin Chapman or oh man, now I forget who the guy was that Gordon Murray. That was it. Thank you. Gordon Murray, the designer of the McLaren F1 road car, which in my opinion, my humble opinion, is the greatest car that was ever made. It was the greatest road going car that's ever made. And it was so smoking hot that, you know, they were supposed to make 500 of them. I think they wound up making 300 of them. And they sold them for $1 million a piece. And now there aren't as many of them because people have wrecked them and all of that. One of the more famous ones is Rowan Atkinson, aka Mr. Bean. He wrecked a McLaren F1, right? And so these cars now are fetching as much as $15 to $16 million each, because a lot of people consider them to be the greatest expression of a road going car. And the McLaren looked the part, but Gordon Murray, who was the designer of the F1, he was a real stickler about form following function. That this thing had to have all the capability before it had any appearance. So basically the design of the skin of the car was just basically enough metal and carbon fiber to stretch over and cover the vital parts. Everything was very simple. And this car had no turbos, no anti-lock brakes, no power steering, no power brakes, but it could do like 250 miles an hour and is one of the rare production cars that actually won at Le Mans, which is a very big deal. So you want to make sure that first and foremost, you're not carrying around excess weight. The second thing, you want to make sure that you have the ability to accelerate hard. Then you want to make sure that you have what you need. You have the balance to handle fluidly, gracefully. You need to have agility. Then you need to be able to stop, slow down, pump your brakes, dog. And I'm going to tell you something. I got to just say this because there are some people, social media has taught a whole bunch of folks they don't need to pump their brakes. They can say whatever they want. And listen, it doesn't work that way. So when if you ever see me in a thread say pump your brakes, I'm telling somebody to ease up, back off, slow down. You dig what I'm saying? Then you want to make sure that you have the proper understanding in order to react. You have to be able to react to the weight that you're carrying around. Again, sometimes you have many friends, sometimes you have few friends. But in any case, you have to know that whatever you're carrying, that you're able to handle. And also that if in the case that you carry around a lot of weight when it comes to friends, acquaintances, contacts, that these are people that give you life, that they are not life vampires. Okay? And you have to have the right reaction in order to negotiate the curves of life. And you have to have the right reaction in order to know when and how to hit your brakes. And you have to have the right reaction to know when to accelerate and when to hold off. And you don't want to you don't want to focus on appearances. You got to think about form following function. Make sure that what you're doing works. This is something, let me stop and hang my hat there for just a second, because a lot of times people go through life and they do things that don't work for them, particularly when it comes to religion, politics, and relationships. Listen, when something is truly working for you, it not only benefits you, but it also benefits others. So make sure that whatever it is that you're doing, that it works for you. That's part of understanding your why and understanding what it takes to run your race. And if you do all of this, I'm not going to tell you that you're going to get this 100% right. And I'm not going to tell you that you'll win every race. And remember, your competition is you, not everybody else. You're not going to win every race. That's okay. See, because the part of you that does the reacting can also do the proacting. And you can go back and review what worked and what didn't work, and you can make the adjustments. You can adjust your horsepower and your torque. You can adjust your the balance. You can adjust your weight. You can adjust your handling. You can adjust your braking. You can adjust. You can make adjustments. And that's what life is all about, is a constant flow of adjustments. Do you know that when the astronauts went to the moon for the first time, I'm not talking about Apollo 11 where they landed on the moon, but the mission that went before them, Apollo 10, that they actually went around the moon. It was said that they did 100 course corrections every minute. Had they got any of them wrong, they would have drifted off into space or possibly even crashed into the moon. So making adjustments, it's the little things, y'all, not the big global changes. It's the little things. And when we talk about things that are going on in this country and the world right now, basically what you want to think about is the little changes. What can I do to impact me? What can I do to impact my family? What can I do to impact my community? And if I'm successful in doing these micro adjustments, then going from my community to my state, or my state to the nation, or my nation to the world, it becomes a lot easier because you've made the necessary small adjustments that facilitate great change. So that's what I have for you today, and I hope that all of that encourages you. I hope that I didn't really geek you out too much, but you have to understand, what does it mean to live a high performance life? See, the thing is that we go through life living beneath our privilege. We have all of this potential and we never fully explore it. We never find out what we're really capable of. We never find out what we can do when we really pour it on. We never find out what we can do when we make the small adjustments. We live beneath our ability, and when we live beneath our ability, we live beneath our privilege. And I ain't talking about privilege like privilege, but privilege as a child of the universe. You dig what I'm saying? So, if you get a chance, make sure you tune in to the Heretic Happy Hour. You can get it on iTunes, Podbean. Make sure you go listen, like, subscribe, give us 5-star ratings. I want to give a shout out to my co-host, to Matt DiStefano, for Katie Valentine, and for Keith Giles. And, you know, I'm just grateful to be in that group. Also, make sure you check out the Love Forward podcast. The Love Forward podcast. And if there's a single episode that I think that everybody needs to hear, it would be the episode that I did with Aaron Abke and Kyle Butler called Cussing, Cursing, and Swearing, Why They Are All Not the Same. Because when you understand that, you'll find out that cussing is no big fucking deal. Had to get one in, right? And so make sure you check out that. And then also check out my blog. It's called Love Minus Religion. And you can check that out at pathos.com. And then you can connect with me on my website at www.derrickday.com. The dots are important. .derrickday.com. Click the link, mark contact, and fill out the little form, and it'll send me an email. And if you send me an email, I promise to respond. And if you send me something really cool, I will reply to you. And let me give you one more thing too. Also, you can catch me on Instagram or Twitter. My handle is Derrick E. Day. That's DerrickEday. And last but not least, you can actually call and leave me a voicemail. That's right. And if you say something really cool, really clever, and keep it, to the point, and if you're okay with it, I'll share it in the broadcast, or I will write something about it, or some other way I will talk about it. But that number is 623-251-5160. 623-251-5160. And make sure you check out the broadcast on Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, Quantum Spirituality, where I deal with love through the lens of quantum reality. That's quantum physics, quantum theory, all of that stuff. So that's what I have, and I hope that you all have a fantastic weekend. Know that I love you. Namaste. I see the light in you. Namaste. I see the God in you. Have a high performance weekend and a high performance week next week. Love y'all. Peace out.